Today's story is about a photographer who spent weeks saving up for a surprise, something his girlfriend mentioned once in passing. The kind of throwaway detail only someone who's actually paying attention would catch. He had it ready. Everything was lined up. Then she called him over, sat him down, and told him she was choosing her ex instead. No guilt, no hesitation, just a clean trade. Here's the thing though. He didn't yell, didn't break down, didn't ask why. He just slipped something back into his pocket and walked away. Months later, she showed up at his door, soaking wet with a camera crew, ready to make him the villain. Didn't exactly go the way she planned. She said, "I think we should just be friends. My ex needs me more." I slipped the car keys I was about to gift her back into my pocket and smiled, "I hope you're happy." A few months later, at midnight, she showed up at my door, with a whole group of people behind her. I've been a freelance photographer for about 6 years. The kind of work where you spend more time chasing good light than chasing people, which honestly suits me just fine. I'm not a social guy by nature. I prefer a quiet job site, a long drive, and a deadline I can actually control. Most of the best work I've ever done happened alone. A field somewhere, a coastline before sunrise, a warehouse with interesting light, and nobody asking me to explain myself. The income is inconsistent. Some months are fine, some months I'm eating cereal for dinner and checking the weather app obsessively because rain means rescheduled shoots. But I'd tried regular 9-to-5 work twice in my life, and both times I lasted less than a year. I'm better at being self-directed. Nina used to joke that I was structurally unemployable, and she wasn't totally wrong. Nina was an accountant, stable, measured, the kind of woman who color-coded her calendar and actually followed it. Organized in a way I genuinely wasn't. We met at a gallery opening a friend dragged me to. I was there to photograph the event. She was there because she collected prints. We spent most of the night arguing about whether documentary photography counted as art or journalism, and I think that was the moment I knew I liked her. She had opinions and she wasn't shy about them. At the time, that felt like exactly what I needed. For almost 3 years, it genuinely worked. No blow-ups over money, no trust spiral, no dramatic fights about the future. She liked that I was calm. I liked that she was grounded. We weren't the couple who posted every weekend on social media or took coordinated vacation photos. We were just two people who fit together without needing a lot of maintenance. She'd sometimes come with me on longer shoots, not to help, just to sit somewhere and read while I worked. That was the whole relationship, honestly. Comfortable proximity. Doing your own thing in the same space. I'm not going to pretend it was perfect. Looking back, I can see the parts where it had started to drift. She'd gotten restless in a way I didn't fully register at the time. Less interested in the things we used to talk about, a little more checked out during conversations, more focused on what other people she knew were doing or buying or building. I noticed it, but told myself it was just a phase, that thing's cycle. I was definitely wrong about that. Then Brody showed back up. He was her ex from a few years before me. I'd heard his name exactly twice in 3 years, both times in passing, no weight on it. Then one day, Nina mentioned he'd reached out, said he was doing better now, that he'd turned his life around. She described him the way people describe a comeback story. Suit, BMW, talking about his business ventures, how he'd finally figured out what he wanted. At first she told me everything. Said he'd hit a rough patch and just needed someone to talk to, and she felt bad because they'd parted on decent terms. I nodded, said sure, sounds fine. But her tone shifted over the next few weeks. Gradually. She started talking about him less like he was an old acquaintance, and more like he was a project she needed to get across the finish line. There was something almost protective in how she talked about him. This careful, measured way of defending him whenever the subject came up, even when I hadn't said anything critical. People don't get protective over people they're just being friendly with. That's a tell. I filed it away. The schedule changes came next. Nothing dramatic at first. A dinner here, a late night there, small adjustments to the week's plans that she explained without me asking. That was the thing that bothered me most, actually. She'd preemptively explain things I hadn't questioned yet. That tells you something about a person's internal state. You only volunteer explanations when you already know something needs explaining. I kept my mouth shut and watched. Then came the excuses. Working late. Helping him with a business plan. Dinner with a friend. Each time I could have pressed her, but I didn't. Not because I was clueless, I knew exactly what was happening. I just wanted to see what she'd do when nobody was applying pressure. Wanted to see whether her honesty would hold up on its own or whether it needed an audience to exist. It needed an audience. One night, we were at our usual diner. She had the chicken sandwich. I had whatever the soup was. Her phone lit up on the table, screen facing out. I caught maybe 2 seconds of it. Dinner tonight. I need to talk. She tilted it away fast, the way people do when something burns them. I didn't say a word, just kept eating. But something settled in my chest that night. Heavy and final, like a door quietly closing. The kind of thing that doesn't feel like pain exactly. It's more like confirmation. The difference between suspecting something and knowing it is smaller than people say. Once your gut makes up its mind, the rest of you is just waiting for the paperwork. We finished dinner. She paid the check, which she never did. I noticed that too. Walked to the car, said goodnight, drove home separately. I sat in my apartment for about an hour that night, just staring at the ceiling. Not upset, just thinking, processing, deciding. Actually, back up. I need to mention something here because it matters. Around that same time, I'd been quietly putting money aside for our anniversary. Nina had mentioned once, totally offhand, that she'd always wanted a small silver car. One of those comments people throw out without expecting anyone to remember. I remembered. So I tracked one down, had a key in my jacket pocket, was waiting for the right moment to surprise her. I thought it would just make her life easier. Funny how you can plan something like that for someone who's already halfway gone. The following evening, she called me over. Said she wanted to talk. Her voice was soft, almost rehearsed, like she'd been running through the lines for a day or two. She sat at her kitchen table and looked at me with this expression I can only describe as settled. Not guilty, not uncertain, just settled, like she'd already done the hard part privately and was now delivering a verdict. She said she thought we should be friends. Said her ex needed her more right now. I stood there in that parking lot behind her apartment afterward. She'd walked me out, which in hindsight was an odd thing to do. And I looked at the key in my pocket, the one I'd been putting money aside for over 6 weeks, the one she didn't know existed and never would. I slipped it back into my jacket, looked her straight in the eye, said quietly, "All right, I hope you're happy." No shouting, no "how could you?" No asking why, because I already knew. She looked relieved, like she'd put down something heavy, not understanding that what she dropped was the last bit of respect I had for her. I turned around, got in my car, and drove away without looking back. That drive was the most peaceful I'd felt in months. No music, just the road and the sound of moving forward. Hold on, let me jump in here for a second. For the listeners, this is me, not Cole. I need you to really picture this. This man had the gift ready, in his actual pocket. He tracked down the specific car she mentioned once in passing, put together the money, had the key on him. And she stood there and hit him with a rehearsed, "Let's be friends" speech. She thought she was putting something down gently. He already knew that. What she didn't know was that she also just handed back a gift she never even saw coming. That's not a breakup. That's a woman who thought she was playing chess and didn't realize the other guy already flipped the board over 5 moves ago. Buckle up. For weeks after, I kept waiting for the sadness to arrive. It never did. I went to work, edited photos, slept better than I had in over a year. I think people expect heartbreak to look a certain way. Late nights, pacing, the whole thing. Sometimes it just looks like a guy sleeping 8 hours straight because the thing that was keeping him up is finally gone. I had dinner with my brother one night, maybe 2 weeks after, and he kept watching me like he was waiting for a crack in the wall somewhere. There wasn't one. I told him I was fine. He didn't believe me. I let it go. I stopped going to that diner. That was about the extent of the change. The soup was fine, but so is every other diner within a 10-minute drive. I threw myself into work instead. Started picking up more travel assignments, landscapes, festivals, portraits of people out in the world doing actual things. My photography had been getting stuck in a rut for a while, I think, because I'd been too comfortable for too long. Once I had nothing specific to come home to, I started going further. Taking risks with compositions I'd been too cautious about. There's a version of you that's only accessible when you stop trying to protect something. I found that out by accident, and I wouldn't go back. It showed. The work got sharper. Editors who'd given me the same boilerplate feedback for 2 years started responding differently. One guy I'd been trying to pitch for 18 months came back with a full assignment offer out of nowhere. Turns out people can tell when you actually mean it. A gallery in Portland reached out about a small exhibit. I called it Stillness. 12 prints, all landscapes, mostly shot over 4 weekends in eastern Oregon and the Washington coast. Sold out inside 2 weeks. I remember standing in that gallery on opening night with a cup of water and some crackers from the snack table, thinking it was kind of funny. I couldn't explain what I was feeling in words, but apparently I could put it on a wall and people would pay for it. The simplest summary I could give anyone who asked was that the photos were about quiet. People seemed to want that. Mutual friends would bring Nina up sometimes, always with that specific tone people use when they think they're delivering news you've been secretly waiting for. She seems good. Dating that Brody guy, the ex she mentioned, seems like things are going well for them. I'd smile and say what I actually believed. The shiniest things are usually the most hollow. And leave it at that. Nobody knew what to do with that answer, which is why it was the right one. I started taking better care of myself in small, practical ways. Not in any dramatic new me kind of deal. More like I started cooking actual food instead of whatever was easiest. Started going to bed before midnight. Started saying no to projects I didn't want just because the money looked okay. Small stuff. The kind of recalibration that happens when you stop organizing your life around someone else's rhythms. I got a dog too, a beagle named Fig. He was about 2 years old when I got him. A little neurotic, absolutely useless as a guard dog, and completely incapable of sitting still for more than 40 seconds. He mostly ran in circles in the apartment, and made the kind of chaos that only feels manageable when it's a 12-pound animal and not a person. He was good company. Then I started hearing things. Brody wasn't who he'd been presenting himself as. The BMW was a lease running 4 months past due. The suit was either borrowed or bought on a card that was already maxed. His business ventures were unpaid loans dressed up with polished talking points and fake momentum. He had a pattern: move into a city, find people willing to believe in the narrative, drain whatever trust and credit they had, and slip out when the timeline compressed. He'd done it at least twice before Nina, possibly more. The kind of guy who lives on a 15-minute window between the pitch and the moment someone checks the receipts. Within a few months, Nina had pulled from her savings covering his debts. The same savings account she'd been carefully building for years. The one she always talked about like it was a foundation. Her backup plan. The thing that gave her options. Gone. She struggled to hold on to her apartment first, then her job, then she lost both. Friends started noticing things she couldn't explain away. Nobody had good answers and nobody knew what to say. I heard all of that secondhand, through mutual people, pieces coming in over a few weeks. A mutual friend texted me once like she was expecting some kind of reaction, sympathy or satisfaction, or something she could report back. I just said, "That's rough," and changed the subject. Because it was rough. It was genuinely rough. But it was also exactly what happens when you ignore every available warning and bet everything on a person who was running a con and calling it a comeback story. I didn't feel satisfied hearing any of it. More like inevitability. Like watching a car accident that was completely telegraphed miles before the impact. You can see every contributing factor lined up. The speed, the ice, the curve, and there's nothing you could have done because you weren't in the car. People who chase the illusion long enough always end up colliding with reality eventually. The collision just takes different forms. By then I had my own things to focus on. Okay, pause. This is me again, not the story. I want to be very specific about something. This is not a situation where nobody could have seen it coming. The signs were in giant neon. She left a guy who remembered a throwaway comment about a car, actually sourced it, bought it, had the key ready, for a man whose entire identity was borrowed money and a leased vehicle. That's not a bad decision. That's a full commitment to ignoring every available piece of information. She went from Michelin star to a food truck with a B health rating and acted surprised when the results weren't the same. The universe isn't cruel, it's just consistent. Anyway, Cole was about to meet someone. A few months later, I was out in Oregon working a travel feature, the kind of long-form assignment where you're on the road for 2 weeks, and the brief is loose enough that you basically get to make the story yourself. I prefer those. More room to actually work. The specific assignment was a piece on small coastal communities, the kind of towns that still run on fishing and handshakes, where the same families have owned the same storefronts for 3 generations. Good material, real faces. Nothing performed about any of it. The editor overseeing the project was a woman named Leah. We spent long days in the same small workspace reviewing photo sets, arguing over captions, drinking bad coffee out of paper cups. She was sharp, like genuinely quick, and had this habit of cutting straight to the problem with whatever you put in front of her. No softening, no warm-up, just the actual note. I found that completely refreshing after years of clients who took 20 minutes to say nothing. First time I showed her a photo I was proud of, she looked at it for maybe 5 seconds and said, "The light's good, but the subject's bored. Reshoot it." She was right. A few days in, she looked at my old film camera, beat up, still runs perfect, and said, "That thing has more life in it than most people I know." I laughed. It was the first time in a while that someone made me laugh without trying to fix something or cheer me up. She wasn't doing either. She was just saying a thing she thought was true. We started working together more as the project went on. She'd tear apart my framing with zero apology. I'd tease her for using too many adjectives in her travel copy, which she absolutely did. She had a whole system of rules she'd made up for her own writing that she violated constantly. There was no big moment, no night where things shifted dramatically. Just 2 people showing up without needing to perform anything, day after day, doing work they cared about. One afternoon toward the end of the trip, we were at a small cafe in one of those coastal towns, going through a folder of shots on my laptop. She pointed at one, a portrait of an old fisherman, hands on the wheel of his boat, not looking at the camera, just watching the water. She said, "That's the whole story. That one frame right there." She wasn't talking about the assignment. I knew what she meant. And somewhere in between the long drives and late-night edit sessions out on that trip, I figured something out. I didn't miss Nina. I missed the idea of Nina, the version I'd built in my head when I thought love meant patience rather than clarity. Those are different things. It took me longer than it should have to understand that. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't saved. The message read, "Cole, I know I messed up. Brody's gone. He lied about everything. I lost everything. But I know you still care about me. Please, can we just talk? You still love me, don't you?" I sat with it for a full minute. Not angry. Not even nostalgic. Just tired. I typed back, "I used to love you, but the person I loved doesn't exist anymore." Hit send. Blocked the number. Put the phone face down on the desk and went back to what I was doing. No second thoughts. Nothing unfinished about it. Things with Leah had continued naturally after that Oregon assignment wrapped. We kept in contact, then closer contact, then at some point it stopped being something we had to describe. She'd relocated to the same city about 2 months later. A work situation she'd been considering for a while that finally made sense. We got dinner once a week, then twice, then we stopped counting. She was the least dramatic person I'd ever spent real time with. No games, no manufactured tension. She said what she meant, and she did what she said. That sounds like a low bar, but I hadn't cleared it in a long time, and I didn't know how much I'd missed it until I found myself sitting across from her one night at some diner in the rain and realized I hadn't felt anxious in weeks. That was new. Yo, time out. I have to take a second here. She lost everything covering for a guy who was essentially running a feelings-based Ponzi scheme, and her grand re-entry move was a "you still love me, right?" text. That's not a plan. That's a Hail Mary thrown by someone who forgot there's an entire defense between her and the end zone. And notice what Cole did. One sentence. Blocked, done, no explanation, no lecture, no door left even slightly cracked. That's the kind of response you only get from someone who genuinely has somewhere better to be. Most people leave a little window open because it feels humane. This man responded like he had a meeting in 5 minutes. Because honestly, he did. Leah was in the next room. Anyway, I need you to stay with me because what happens next is a lot. About 3 months after that, Leah had fallen asleep on the couch. Book open on her chest, one of those thick travel memoirs she was always halfway through. I was in the back room running edits when the pounding started. Violent. Not a knock. Actual pounding, like someone trying to shake the door off its frame. I figured wrong address, drunk neighbor, something like that. I got up slow, not worried. Then the voice. Cole, open this door. You coward? I froze. That voice, raw and cracked, and completely out of place in the quiet of that building. I knew it instantly. Nina. When I opened the door, the scene outside looked like something staged. She was soaked. It was raining. Mascara running in 2 long streaks down her face, eyes wild and unfocused. And standing behind her were 3 people, phones raised, recording. One of them was whispering, "Keep filming, keep filming." She pointed straight at me, voice shaking with something between rage and desperation. "You left me. You ruined my life. You did this to me." I looked at her for a moment, not in shock, more in this kind of slow disbelief. This was the same woman who once spent 40 minutes on the phone debating what throw pillows to order for the apartment. Now she was standing in my doorway in the rain with a film crew, making accusations at midnight. The distance between those 2 versions of a person is a long way to fall in a short time. I kept my voice flat. "What are you doing, Nina?" She stepped closer, eyes glassy and not quite tracking right. Said I thought I was better than her now. Said I was posting my happy little pictures while she was suffering. Said I abandoned her. Said I broke her. Her friends started chiming in behind her, trying to bait something out of me. Phones still up, capturing every angle they could find. It wasn't hard to read. This was a setup. She wanted footage of me losing it, something she could post, something that framed her as the victim and me as the guy who destroyed her life. She'd planned this whole thing out. She'd told people to bring their phones, told them where to stand. The only thing she hadn't planned for was a camera system that had been recording the whole porch since before she arrived. Leah appeared behind me, completely calm. "I'm calling the police," Nina laughed. This hollow sound, the kind that doesn't have any actual amusement in it. "Go ahead, let everyone see what kind of man he really is." I didn't move, didn't raise my voice, just stood there with my hands in my pockets looking at her with the kind of quiet that drives people who expected a reaction completely insane. When I finally said something, I kept it almost gentle. "You weren't abandoned, Nina. You abandoned yourself the moment you chose the lie." Something in that landed. I could see it cross her face, a flash of something real before the mask snapped back. Then she started screaming again, pushing against me, and her friends kept filming. Leah already had the line open. When the officers pulled up, I stepped to the side and pulled up the security camera footage on my phone. Clear as day, her arriving, the pounding, trying to force her way in. The whole timeline, from the moment she stepped onto the property. One of the officers watched it through twice. Didn't say anything for a moment, just handed the phone back to me with this look that was basically, "I've had a long shift, and this is very straightforward." The other officer spoke to Nina. She was shaking now, the rage cycling into something more desperate and fragmented. "He's lying. He ruined me. You don't understand what he did to me." Her voice had lost whatever edge it had when she arrived. She just sounded exhausted. Even her friends had slowly lowered their phones. The energy had completely shifted, and they all felt it. "Ma'am, you need to leave the property right now. If you come back here, it's trespassing." As the officers walked her off the porch, she turned back one last time. Eyes blazing, voice cracking at the edges. "You'll regret this, Cole. You'll regret not saving me." I waited until the patrol lights faded down the street, counted to about 10 in my head. Then I said it mostly to myself. "No, Nina, you're already living with the regret. Not me." I closed the door, locked it. Leah took my hand. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. For the first time in a while, actually, yeah. We stood there in the kitchen for a few minutes, not saying much. I could still hear the rain against the windows. Fig was hiding under the couch. That's where he went whenever anything loud happened, which was classic. I made us each a cup of tea, and we sat at the kitchen table while the city went quiet outside. At some point, Leah said, "She came here to hurt you and ended up helping you." I sat with that. She was right, I think. Not because the confrontation changed anything, but because it confirmed everything. Watching Nina do all that and feeling nothing but tired clarity was the final piece of proof I hadn't realized I was still looking for. Whatever I'd been carrying around, some low-level background question about whether I'd been too cold when I walked away, whether I'd owed her more, all of it just dissolved. The answer was no. I'd been correct. I slept better that night than I had in years. Wait. She showed up with a pre-organized camera crew. Let that land for a second. This was not a spontaneous emotional breakdown. She planned the night, recruited people, told them to bring their phones, gave them blocking instructions. She thought she was going to pull up to that door, get a reaction out of him, and go viral as the wronged woman. What she did not account for was security cameras, a partner who immediately called 911, and a guy who responded to all of it with his hands in his pockets. The villain origin story turned into a nature documentary, where the predator tripped over its own feet on camera. I fully expect her next move to be a TED Talk called How I Planned My Own Defeat. Anyway, let's wrap this up. Final update. After that night, things went quiet for real. A few weeks later, Leah and I packed what we had and left the city behind. We moved to a small town on the Oregon coast, the kind of place you have to want to find. Tucked between foggy cliffs and evergreen hills, ocean about a 10-minute walk from the main road, I opened a tiny photography studio. Nothing complicated. White walls, open light, the smell of salt drifting in through a cracked window. No clients chasing trends, no one wanting fake candids for a brand deal. Just landscapes, local portraits, and the kind of work I actually wanted to be making. It was the least impressive version of success on paper. It was also the most I'd ever felt like myself. Leah freelanced as a travel editor from the same space most days. She'd sit by the window with her laptop on her knees, hair wrecked from the wind, writing about hidden trails and coastal storms and the kind of towns that don't make the travel magazines. Sometimes she'd read me a sentence out loud and ask if it had too many adjectives. It always did. We didn't talk much about what came before any of this. Didn't need to. Peace doesn't actually require explaining. The studio paid the bills inside of 4 months. That felt like success to me. Not some number, not an accolade. Just, the work is real. It sustains itself. Nobody's pretending. I could go a whole week without checking my phone more than twice a day, which 3 years earlier would have felt like a foreign concept. I also finally bought a decent espresso machine, which I mentioned because Nina always said it was an unnecessary expense. She was wrong about a lot of things. I deleted most of my social media somewhere in there. Not out of anger, just total disinterest. Once you've spent time inside someone else's chaos, silence becomes the most attractive thing you can imagine. One morning, early spring, Wednesday, I think, wait, no, it was a Thursday, whatever. I was cleaning out the drawer of my desk when my hand hit something cold. The car key. Still on the original ring, the same one I'd planned to hand Nina that night in the parking lot behind her apartment. I turned it over in my palm, the metal catching the light from the window. Leah walked in holding 2 mugs of coffee. She looked at my face and said, "You look like you found buried treasure." I smiled. In a way. I told her what it was. She set the mugs down and looked at me for a long moment, expression soft. "I'll make sure you never regret giving it away again." I knew she meant it. That evening we drove down Highway 101, ocean to the right, sun burning gold somewhere past the horizon. The radio was low, some old country station that faded in and out. Neither of us said much for a while, just watching the road curve. At some point, Leah glanced over and asked, "Do you ever think about her?" I thought about it honestly before answering. About Nina's voice, the whole mess of it, the version of myself that stayed patient and quiet while watching something fall apart in slow motion and called it love. "Not really," I said. "I think about who I was when I was with her, and how far I've come from that." She reached over and laced her fingers through mine. The road bent out ahead of us, and for the first time in a long time, what was coming felt completely clear. As for Nina, word eventually filtered through mutual people, piece by piece. Unpaid debts, another relationship that didn't hold, her social media disappeared one morning, and nobody asked where it went. Some people felt bad for her. I heard she'd moved back to wherever she was originally from. A fresh start, maybe. I genuinely hope it works out for her. Not in a complicated way, just the basic human version of hoping someone gets themselves together. I didn't hate her, didn't pity her either. I just let it be. Fig eventually came to live with us in Oregon. He hated the sound of the ocean at first, spent his first week at the coast, pressed against the back wall of the studio barking at nothing. Then one morning I opened the side door and he just walked out, sat on the steps, and watched the waves for about 20 minutes without moving. After that, he was fine. Some things just need time to adjust to the new normal. Letting go isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only way to keep your dignity intact. There's one thing I still haven't fully figured out, actually. What to do with that car key. I keep it in the desk drawer. Leah says I should just give it to her and stop overthinking it. She's probably right, but for now it stays in the drawer. Seems like the right place for it. Look, I'm not gonna sit here and act like this guy was perfect. But here's what I keep coming back to. She handed him a rehearsed speech in a parking lot, and he smiled, pocketed the gift she never knew about, and just built something better. No drama, no long texts, no running back. When she showed up months later with a film crew expecting him to snap, he gave her nothing. Security cameras, one calm sentence, and the door closed. That's not cold. That's just knowing your own worth and not putting it up for auction. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in his position? And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. We've got more of these coming. We've got more of these coming. We've got more of these coming. We've got more of these coming.